Hello Guardians, I want to show you something that I've cooked up for quite a while now. A build that will be quite the stark difference from the typical builds that you're used to seeing by now. One that will diverge from the current stick, move, dodge, and melee meta that has been growing more and more common. I have waited a while to make sure that this build was just perfect. And I have to say that I might have cooked so well that I might be tried for arson. But without further ado, hit that like and sub button for more meta breaking options. Let's get into it. The prime catalyst for this build is going to be Agar Scepter with its catalyst, its superb ability to damage enemies using stasis. Using its perk Agar's Call, upon final blows it creates multiple statues of frozen corpses to be. This weapon will also grant us the major ability to debuff and destroy a massive amount of enemies, as well as those of which who are resilient enough to deal with its base form will have to manage its catalyst perk. Will, given form, will drain the Guardian's super. It will overflow the magazine and fire a beam that will slow and freeze enemies until either the super or magazine runs out. Fortunately for this build, we will not be running out of ammo reserves anytime soon. We are partnering this exotic with the one and only Foe Tracer. Its perk, Relentless Tracker, states that providing ability damage to an enemy will provide a weapon damage bonus. This bonus will serve as a ×4 weapon surge, and upon killing a marked target with a weapon that matches our ability, will also receive an elemental pickup. Marking a target with your ability will provide the Guardian with a 25% weapon damage boost to boot. This will take a lot less pressure to defeat enemies as well as freeze them with Agar's Scepter. Now for the build that keeps it all together, Prismatic Hunter. For our super, we're going with the Silk Strike super. Not only with Agar's Scepter do we have the ability to go for a much more aggressive ad clear option, we will also have Silk Strike as a defensive alternative, as it gives us a massive damage resistance buff on activation. This damage resistance can go even further with our fragments and the use of Transcendence. This will also allow us to obtain Woven Mail on or pickup with our fragments, which will give us even more defensive opportunities. So this is why I chose Silk Strike over other options, as it is the ideal choice for using it for most content. But now it is time for our aspects. I lead with Stylish Executioner, primarily to deal with the fact that we are debuffing enemies with this build constantly. This means that our invisibility uptime is going to be unrivaled. And after we break invisibility, our powered melees will weaken targets. We're going to be pairing this with our other aspect, Gunpowder Gamble. Since we will be spreading massive amounts of debuffs with the power of Agar's Scepter, our Gunpowder Gamble will be used left, right, and center due to how often we get slow and freeze final blows. These improvised explosives soften up bigger targets and clears up the squishies around us. And now for our abilities. Duskfield is a given. It lasts incredibly long and will provide us with our stasis damage boost, whilst also slowing and freezing multiple targets. Next is our melee, and honestly, it depends on a multitude of factors, but it boils down to whether you're willing to use light or darkness damage on your weapons. Personally for me, I like running double special with Agar's Scepter in middle end content around my light level. And what I had found out in my discoveries is that rocket power sidearms, specifically Indebted Kindness from the Warlord's Ruin Dungeon, can produce a huge amount of light energy by itself as long as you're getting rapid final blows with it. Mine comes with Adagio, but I believe that something like Volt Shot would further increase this effect. Regardless of what you have, it's so self-sufficient that I would rather opt to use another Darkless melee, specifically Threaded Spike, due to its ability to sever and create tangles. And when the solar-powered rocket sidearm Aberrant Action makes its stride with Ambitious Assassin and Incandescent, I could only see this build going further as a result. However, if you aren't keen on the current sidearm option, or you don't fancy the light weapon options you have, you can use Knife Trick instead. Just know that Threaded Spike is a lot better for what we're using it with. We will be using Gambler's Dodge to get our melee back, which will allow us to bypass reloading entirely. And speaking of fragments, let's revise them. Facet of Balance will allow rapid light damage to refund melee energy, and rapid dark damage to refund grenade energy. Both we will be using to constantly refresh our ability uptime, gaining final blows of light in the form of a rocket-powered sidearm, and dark in the form of our abilities. Facet of Protection allows us to have a 15% damage reduction while surrounded, and whilst we are transcended, we are rewarded an extra 20%. This facet allows us to get our 32% damage buff in total when we combine both Transcendence and damage reduction while surrounded. Facet of Dawn states that powered melee hits will activate Radiant, and the uptime regarding our abilities will be at an all-time high. Facet of Command is one of the most broken perks that has ever graced the game. This states that each time that your enemies are either frozen or suppressed, they will reload all your weapons. And as you can see from the footage, we will be doing a lot of freezing with this build. We will be comboing this with Agriceptor's super form as well as Chill Clip Heavy, allowing us little need to reload in this build. And finally, we have Facet of Purpose. We collect an orb and it gives us a defensive buff based on a subclass of our choosing. And in this case, we are getting Woven Mail in return for getting our Silk Strike Super. So now that we've covered the inner workings of this build, it is time for us to cover the good stuff, involving armor mods and alternative loadouts. As usual, for most hunter builds in the game, having a focus of resilience first and then discipline is more crucial than ever. This will provide us with intrinsic 30% durability, as well as better grenade uptime. So, as for armor, we will begin with helmets. And for starters, we're going to place 2 different siphon mods based on my double special setup that I have been using. One arc siphon mod for my special sidearm, and one stasis siphon mod for my Agriceptor. The stasis siphon mod is a non-negotiable for this build, as the orbs that we're able to produce is absolutely insane with it. The second one is based on the element of your special or primary that you feel like using. And lastly, but not needed, is hands-on to make use of our melee kills. Do note that Threaded Spike refunds melee energy based on hits. Hitting 5 enemies will refund a full 40% of our melee back to us. Combine this with the light damage that we are dealing, the gunpowder gamble that we are firing at enemies, and the frequency of dodges, and we'll be able to constantly refund our super with melee damage. Next up is the arm piece, and we are running Impact Induction, Firepower, and Heavy Handed. Impact Induction will allow our melee to feed into our Transcendent Grenade and Duskfield Grenade for better uptime. Firepower will allow us to produce orbs on Gunpowder Gamble kills and Transcendent kills. And lastly, Heavy Handed is to provide orbs on melee kills, which is more than ideal. Now is the chest piece, and I will admit that my armor build is a little stacked, and it allows me some wiggle room where others may not have that. I believe both Sniper Resistance and Concussive Dampener are what I believe to be mandatory selections. I have Charged Up as it allows me to stack armor charges much easier and allows me less pressure to refresh my special ammo for my double special build, but feel free to dismiss this mod if it will intervene with max resilience. Next up is the leg piece, and again, heavy duty stuff we have right here. The main priorities are Stasis Scavenger for more Agriceptor ammo on pickup, and Better Already, as it can be a lifesaver when you pick this up, especially if you can go invisible or hide near cover while grabbing an orb. I run stacks on stacks, making stacking armor charges a lot easier and a lot swifter. Lastly is a class item. I have Reaper for spawning an orb on a weapon kill after dodging, special finisher for transitioning my armor charges into special ammunition that I can use after a finisher attack, and lastly, Powerful Attraction, so that I don't have to be near enemies that are around me to reap the benefits of Orbs of Power. No pun intended. Now is the upgrade paths that you can take to further break the limits of this build. We will also be making changes to support endgame content if you so choose to bring it there. We have already mentioned that Aberrant Action would make a build like this absolutely bonkers, especially noting the fact that solar weapon kills will also be able to trigger Gunpowder Gamble. But what we haven't had covered is the option involving class items. I believe that the class item combo, Foe Tracer and Pseudo-Arachne's Facade, is more than ideal. Foe Tracer retains its surge damage boost for 11 seconds, and in exchange of that, we lose the elemental pickup, but in a build like this, the drawback is almost negligible. Pseudo-Arachne's Facade allows for 10 seconds of Woven Mail instead of the measly 5 we have. And with this Silk Strike subclass, you can refresh this buff with Facet of Purpose by picking up an Orb of Power. So as long as you're creating and receiving Orbs of Power, you can keep this buff up for much longer. And as for seasonal offerings, Radiant Orbs will allow you to get Radiant on Orb pickup, increasing your damage. And Shield Crush will give you more damage and uptime with a grenade and melee based on the defensive buff that you have on you. Now, there is a disclaimer for endgame content. For those who are uninitiated, Double Special isn't ideal for higher endgame content like GMs or high-level law sectors, and using them in such content will encourage self-frustration and enmity from your fire team. In these pieces of content, I would recommend an Energy Primary to pair with Agriceptor, likely something to manage overloads or barrier champions, as Stasis Grenades and Chill Clip weapons can manage unstops. Speaking of, I'd opt to use a Chill Clip linear like Fire and Forget or Suspect Them to free set enemies while managing ammo, as well as exchanging Charged Up, Stacks on Stacks, and Scavenger for more defensive options. But with that, I believe we have covered all bases. Please do leave a like and subscribe. Why, you ask? I love this weapon. Watch. This is hilarious. What is this?
Actually stun locked.
Poor guy. Put him out of his misery.